The film begins with the Germans taking over France in the World War II. German Nazi Sanborn orders his subordinates, Jack and Soch, to kill some innocent French civilians in order for the others to start speaking. They bring forward a woman named Morgan to kill, but an older woman comes forward and begs for the innocent people to be spared. Our lead, Ryder, shows up there as a savior and kills as many Nazis as he can by shooting and bombarding. At last, he gets shot and wakes up in the present day in a motel. Before leaving, he asks the receptionist to help him track how long he has been staying here, but the receptionist fails to help. As Ryder roams the city on his bike, we get to see a private corporation called the Sanborn Group. The owner of the place is Sanborn. His associate is Jack, and the architect present in his office is Soch. They're all the exact same from Ryder's World War vision. Sanborn is having second thoughts about turning their city's rural areas into a concrete utopia because he fears poor people might get hurt economically. The devious Soch uses his charms to convince Sanborn that whatever he's doing is for a greater cause. Sanborn ends up striking a deal with him. He tells Jack to arrange a meeting with the city's councilman, Mr. Hammond, to get his vote for the approval. Scenes switch back to Ryder, who gets another vision of a little girl being kidnapped. He stops by a local bar for breakfast, where the owner is, Shelley. When Shelley's granddaughter Morgan appears, Jack recognizes her from his vision. Shelley gets a cheeseburger prepared for Ryder. While the cook makes it, Jack shows up with his thugs to collect protection money from Shelley. Ryder and Jack exchange very intense eye contact, during which Ryder recognizes him from his vision too. Once he leaves, Ryder eats his burger and asks Shelley if she's seen or heard about a little girl being taken away around here. Shelley finds his question very unusual and tells him no such case has come to her attention yet. Ryder leaves some cash behind in his way out. In another vision, Ryder finds himself way back in the Roman times. Morgan is being convicted to death by Sanborn, along with a little girl for committing small-level crimes. He allows Morgan to get someone to volunteer in a fight on her behalf, and if her fighter wins, she won't be convicted. While she appears clueless of the situation, Ryder shows up as his fighter, dressed up as an ancient Roman warrior. He's shaken out of his vision by Jack's men, who find Ryder staring into the abyss on his bike. The way Ryder talks back, Jack finds him audacious and almost picks a fight with him but walks away with his squad when Detective Timmons makes his entrance. He begins interrogating Ryder for being a newbie in their town. But Shelley and Morgan come out to save him. They vouch for him being a good person and bring him back into their bar. They offer him a room in their bar for cheaper rates. When Morgan shows him to his room, he asks her if she knows about someone named Sanborn. She shows him the magazine cover of Sanborn and tells him how he runs their town by constantly tearing everything down in the name of modernization. Luckily, Councilman Hammond opposes his views and has saved the town. In addition to that, she introduces herself as Hammond's lawyer. Later, his Rome vision continues, in which he holds a sword against an entire group of Sanborn's fighters. In the present, Councilman Hammond personally meets with Sanborn to tell him he doesn't have his vote. Disappointed, Sanborn unites with Jack outside his building, which Ryder sees from afar. Back in his vision, he sees himself barbarously fighting the group of men to save Morgan and the little girl. As of now, Sanborn shares that Hammond is an obstacle in his project. Outside, Ryder sees Soch walking out of the building and envisions him by Sanborn's side in his Rome vision, where he fights Jack and another man in round 2. Currently, he follows Soch, not knowing Timmons is also keeping an eye on him from afar. Ryder returns to the bar, where he bonds with Morgan and Shelley. He comes across the news article of the missing girl he envisioned earlier. While he's having flashbacks of his vision, Shelley speculates that he has something to do with the kidnapping since he was asking about such an incident earlier. Elsewhere, Sanborn is roaming the town and planning to compromise for Hammond, but Jack and Soch convince him to stand up for himself by kidnapping Hammond's daughter to forcefully get his vote. Sanborn agrees on terms if nobody gets hurt in the process. That night, Ryder drinks an entire bottle of alcohol. Timmons shows up again and observes Ryder from a distance. He ends up sneaking out his empty alcohol bottle to find his fingerprints and run some tests on them. When Ryder returns to his room, Soch anonymously calls him and offers him to join forces with them, for he knows everything about who Ryder is. In another one of his visions, Ryder finds himself coming to England in the year 1476. Morgan owns a tavern there. Unfortunately, Sanborn and his men barge into her tavern and demand protection money. As they misbehave with her, Shelley intervenes and requests to be spared. In the present, Ryder sees Shelley and heads straight to Detective Timmons to collect more information on Sanborn. Given his past encounters, he suggests keeping distance from Sanborn and begins questioning Ryder about his past. He refuses to answer his questions and heads back to the bar, where Soch visits him personally. After giving his business card, he keeps the offer to work for him open and hints that he's a motivational speaker besides being an architect. Ryder recalls his parts from all of his visions so far and realizes Soch was poisoning Sanborn's head with his motivational speaking all along. He figures Soch knows something about his condition, so he takes his card. When Soch leaves, he gets updates from Morgan on Hammond's decision, which is still against Sanborn's. His England vision continues, in which Jack puts his hands on Morgan. Ryder shows up there and once again saves Morgan by fighting the bad guys. When he comes back to his present senses, Shelley asks him why he keeps getting lost in his head every other minute. In order to help him, she takes him to a church and sends him in alone. There, Ryder encounters an older woman who begins preaching the coexistence of the good and evil since the beginning of time. She tells Ryder he's here for a reason and that he must know if he should fight or resist when he's tested. She disappears in the middle of the conversation. When Ryder walks out, he finds out from Shelley that he can see dead people like her. Ryder has another vision of working with Jack and killing a man. When he checks his car, he finds the sedated Annie. He is startled by this vision, but Shelley doesn't get surprised by his behavior anymore. That night, Ryder returns to his room and calls Soch to work with him. Jack picks up and accepts to take him. They share about Ryder being their new recruit with Sanborn, who has no issues with that, though he loses his temper over Hammond calling him a bully on national TV. The next day, Ryder shows up at the spot he was asked to come to. There, Jack pays him and other hitmen $5,000 and tasks them to kidnap Annie, after which they will get their final payment. On his way out, Ryder envisions the World War, in which Sanborn shoots a family under Soch's pressure and decides to retreat because he's tired of being cruel. Currently, Soch finds him in the middle of nowhere to further drop hints about his condition and pollute his mind, but Ryder stays resilient and recalls what the dead woman had taught him. Ryder returns to the bar and has a word with Morgan. The two drink and get caught up in a moment, which naturally leads them to kiss. Timmons spoils their moment by calling the landline and asking to send Ryder outside. Ryder meets him in his car, where Timmons revealed that he's run tests on his fingerprints and has found no record of him. He's deluded that Ryder might be a ghost but still requests Ryder to keep him updated on his next move. Ryder shows no interest and continues brewing romance with Morgan. The next morning he finds Megan gone. Shelley tells him Morgan is off to her lawyer duties and demands an explanation behind Soch's business card. Ryder ends up packing his stuff and leaving. Meanwhile, Morgan confronts Hammond on how Sanborn has promised to not tear down the housing, whereas his project's blueprints tell otherwise. Hammond assures her he was never going to vote in Sanborn's favor, due to which his bill will never be passed. Now Annie walks out of her car and gives Hammond and Morgan warm hugs. On the other hand, Sanborn comes across an ancient sealed letter, which demands for him to do the right thing. He begins having the same visions as Ryder. In all of them, he sees Shelley stopping him from doing evil. As he reflects on his mistakes, scenes cut to Morgan, who receives a call from Shelley, who's concerned about Ryder's sudden disappearance. Ryder now joins the bad guys and gears up before the kidnapping. As he's having a word with Soch, Sanborn shows up and tells them to abort the mission as an attempt to become a better person. Jack has put in efforts in the planning, so he refuses to back down now. He leaves with his boys and Ryder to carry out his mission. Soch sends Ryder and others after Annie. After her ballet classes, Annie gets into her car, which Ryder and the men chase. They purposefully herd the car to a place where Jack and Soch are already in position. As Jack is giving the drivers the option to leave, Sanborn shows up in his car and begs to stop this nonsense. Jack ends up shooting him to get him out of the way. Ryder also blows his cover and begins shooting all the men, including Jack. Annie's drivers seize the opportunity and drive away from there. Before dying, Jack recognizes Ryder as the man who kills him in every lifetime. It turns out that all the visions Ryder was having were from his previous lives. He did envision his future related to Anna, but he changed it because of the dead woman's advice. As Jack dies, Ryder points his gun at Soch, who distracts him by talking and shoots him instead. Ryder also shoots back and kills him. Before dying, Morgan shows up with Shelley and begs to stay with him in a vulnerable state. Here, Ryder realizes that in all of his lives, he thrived to be with Morgan, but was killed eventually every time. History repeats itself when he dies again. The next day, he visits the dead woman at the church, who shares some words of advice. This time, the woman doesn't disappear. When the camera zooms out, we find out Ryder is attending his own funeral. He sees Sanborn mourning him alongside Morgan and Shelley. Morgan looks back, and despite not seeing Ryder's soul, she smiles at him. Here, the film ends. I am sure you liked the story recap. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps like that. Thanks.